All right, let's just hope you can't hear the lawnmower in the background because we're doing this right now. We got the bangs covering up the psoriasis outbreak, looking good. We got our favorite gal, Betty the cowlick, looking fly this morning. So who's ready for some 2020 favorites? So we have our favorite and one and only holiday mug. It has been featured in every single one of my Vlogmas videos, which so far has been 2, very thrilling. We need to show it off once more. Hello, my good sir. Will you please? Home sweet gnome. There we go. Everyone's been acquainted now and we can get started. So, I've decided to not prepare for this video because I don't know if you know this, but I get really anxious when I try to talk about my favorites. It doesn't make sense. I should be excited, but I get really stressed. I feel like I will let them down. I don't want to do that. I want to, you know, I want to give you the full story, the full details, and then I try to over prepare and then I get stressed and then it doesn't happen. So instead, I have a very short bullet list that has my favorites and I have no other notes, and we're just gonna go. There's no way of knowing, but me and Betty, we're here for the ride. So we're just gonna sit here, we're gonna chat. Maybe you should get a beverage, get a little snack, get comfortable, put on the onesie, because I currently don't have my onesie with me, so it's been rough. It's been rough. We're going to get started. So these books are not in any order. We're not going to count down to the number one. It was stressful just to pick the top 10-ish. We're just gonna talk about some books that I really enjoyed this year, and maybe you will also enjoy these books, maybe you have enjoyed these books, and that's where we're gonna go from. So now we're actually gonna get started. So first off, I have Lovely War, and this was both unexpected and expected to be a favorite this year. I started off reading it, I think in March or April. Honestly, as we all know, those were stressful months. And during that time, I was actually reading a lot. I don't think I made a lot of videos. I was consistent, but I didn't talk so much about the books I was reading, but I do think I had a vlog on that one. Lovely War. It's basically Aphrodite having a chat with Hephaestus and Ares, 2 of her lovers. Hephaestus and her are married, but there's like a whole thing with her and Ares. It's a thing. It's been going on for millennia. So it takes place during World War II, and Aphrodite is basically talking about her 2 greatest accomplishments in love, where she brought 2 individuals together. And she's talking about these 2 different parallel kind of stories that are happening around the same time with 2 different couples, but they're kind of interconnected. It's basically what it's like. Honestly, what a great story. I really enjoyed it. My copy sadly has, I think, 30 or 50 pages that were misprinted, which is tragic, but that's just life, you know what happens. So I really enjoyed this story. I thought the writing was beautiful. The plots, how they came together, fantastic. I just really enjoyed this story. Next up, I have This Is How You Lose the Time War. This book, I was so excited to read this book. I was so happy I finally got my hands on this book. I had waited so long to read it because it's adult fiction and it's this thick. So it's like $25 and it's really short. And just when you think about that in your head, your heart just kind of cracks a little bit. But at one point I was like, you know what? I've been meaning to read this for so long. I think it's completely up my alley. I love time travel stories. I love them so much, but I'm also pretty particular about them because in my mind they have to be realistic. I have to be like, oh yes, okay, this makes sense. It doesn't go against any of the laws of time travel that like have been discussed over the last century or so, you know. It should make sense. I will make a video talking about my time travel recommendations and my love of time travel. That'll be a different video because I have so many feelings and thoughts to share about time travel. Oh my goodness. But this book did it right. Oh my goodness. It's basically about these two individuals who come from differing societies in the future, and they're time travel agents. So they're going throughout time, changing things, fixing things to make sure that the timeline goes as they would like it to, as they see it to. But of course, either side has their own agenda, so they're kind of working against each other. One person undoes something, the other person goes back and fixes it, that kind of thing. So it's kind of like this back and forth war. And at some point, these two individuals, blue and red, that are coming from these different societies, they start leaving each other little messages coded in their surroundings. And it's kind of like an enemies to lovers situation. The writing style is very different from just a straight and go story where, you know, you're reading the plot and things are happening. So some people have found it a little confusing. I found that to be one of the most intriguing parts of the whole story. I think the best way to read it is to not get too caught up in the confusion of it. Just kind of go with it, read it, kind of try to pay attention whose perspective it's coming from, because the two perspectives go back and forth with the chapters. But it's a story based on feeling. So you're reading about these little events that are happening, and you're seeing these things going back and forth, and you're seeing all this imagery. And that's where the beauty of the story lies. Oh my gosh, I love it so much. It's so good. I love it. Oh my goodness. I need to reread it. It's so fantastic. I read it in the beginning of this year, so by now I've forgotten the whole plot. It's out. Oh, it's fantastic. Next up, I have one that I wasn't actually really expecting to be on this list. But whenever I think about it and think about the time when I read it in, I get really excited. And that is Beach Read. So Beach Read, I was excited about, you know, it's a romance, it's a contemporary romance. I was like, yeah, sure, okay, I can do that. Because contemporary romances I can read pretty easily because I don't have to really concentrate on the plot and the characters and all of that. So I can read them while I'm in classes and not be worried about forgetting major details and being confused, which is what happens when I try to do big fantasy world building stories. So I picked up the story and I was reading it, and I just read it very quickly. And that's what determines a really good story for me. Any book that I can read in a short period of time or have difficulty putting down basically makes it onto my favorites list. That's just the way my brain functions. So this story is basically about two writers, and they're both having writer's block, and they both end up in neighboring cabins, and they decide to basically switch their genres of what they write and write completely out of their comfort zone. So the plot might sound kind of generic, kind of like, oh wow, writers switch genres, let's have a good time. But it's done so well. Like, there's a lot of different elements that's brought into the story, and just the characters' connection throughout the story is really well done. I think sometimes in contemporary romance, it's like two people meet on a fairground and they're like, oh my goodness, those ears, wow, oh my gosh, take me out to dinner. And you're like, yikes, this would never happen in real life. That's so awkward. Betty is saying hello. But in this one, it's just a very gradual connection that strengthens throughout the story, and I really appreciated that, and it was actually pretty realistic, so I really enjoyed it. There were a lot of random fun chapters in there too that I did not see coming. It was a joy. So if you're looking for something fun, cute, but also has like some heavier themes throughout that it deals with, this might be it. Next up, I have an arc that I read that was supposed to come out like October, November, August, September, sometime at the end of the year it was supposed to come out, but it actually got pushed back to 2021, so it hasn't come out yet. But I got the arc of this way at the beginning of the year, and it was something that intrigued me. But you know, sometimes with arcs, you request an arc that sounds like it could be interesting, but there's no real way of knowing if you'll actually love the story. You read the quick little snippet of the summary and you're like, yeah, sounds pretty good, let's see. And then you get it and like, it's real hit or miss. Could be fantastic, could be eh. This one I ended up really enjoying. So it's a queer romance story, and There are a lot of different characters. From what I can remember of the plot, there is a group of friends and they kind of get like split up and they both try making a movie for this film contest because a couple of them really want to go to film school and this could be like the big scholarship that could get them in. I don't have too many details I remember of the plot, but it basically surrounds this group of friends. They go out, they hang out, and there's a lot of... Can you hear that? It just started pouring. Anyways, so it surrounds this group of friends and they go out, they hang out, they have like a lot of tension. There's a lot of romantic tension at times. And that's basically the gist of the story. There's not that much heavy plot to it. It's really much character driven, which is what I really enjoyed about the story. There wasn't a lot that you had to follow along. It was just people in their lives, and I really appreciated that. And there was a character throughout, I won't say what their name was in case it's a spoiler, but there was a character that starts off as kind of like abrasive and you really dislike this character and you think they're all pompous and all that, but then later you find out a lot more about them, and as you would think, then you kind of enjoy them as a person more. So I really liked that. It was a great read. Next up, we have what everyone knew was coming, what you would expect from my 2020 favorites list, and that is Check Please, Sticks and Scones. My goodness, we've been waiting for this moment. We've been waiting to talk about the second volume of Check Please for the entire year. Yes, we have. Yes, we have. As you may know if you've seen a single one of my videos, hopefully, I love Check Please with every fiber of my being. So finally, when the second volume came out, at this point I had already read all of them online because they're available on Ngozi Ukazu's website as a web series, so you know, go check them out. I'd already read the whole thing, but to have it in a physical, manifested form, I just literally started crying. So, you know, as one might expect, it's a favorite. This is one of those moments where I'm having a very difficult time explaining one of my favorite books of all time. So I'm going to try. I'm just gonna word vomit it all out there, and then you can kind of sift through what's there, and good luck. This story is about Biddy, and he was a figure skater in high school. Now he's gone off to college. He has joined the hockey team. And he's also a vlogger. He vlogs about baking, and he loves baking, and he loves pies, and he's just the sweetest little bean. The sweetest little bean. Oh. Yeah, so Biddy. He's on the hockey team, and he makes a lot of really great friends. The hockey bros in this story are so great. I love them. It's a really great story. It has a really great love plot line. It's very sweet. It's very heartwarming. If you're looking for something that will make you feel safe and comfortable and warm inside, this is the story. This kind of turned into a recommendation video, but you know, this is what life is right now. It's a mess. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. So I loved the second volume. I haven't come to terms with that there is only 2 volumes, that it's only about these 4 years in college. Maybe Ngozi Ukazu will make another series. You know, that's what I'm hoping, but gosh, I will miss them so much. I'm doing a yearly reread. Yes. Next up, we have another time travel story. Oh my gosh, what a good year for time travel stories. Let me say, it's been good time travel reading this year. And that story is Una Out of Order. I was very thrilled to read this book. I picked it up. I started reading it. I thought, hot damn, wait a minute. This is excellent. Oh my gosh, this is exactly what I want in a time travel story. It has everything. Seriously, one of my top absolute favorites of this year. Oh my goodness. Basically, it follows Una, and she experiences living her life entirely out of order, time travel wise, chronologically, because after midnight on New Year's Eve, on her 18th birthday, the next morning she wakes up and she's 50 years old. She doesn't remember any of the time in between, but she knows that this is the next year of her life. So she lives that year trying to figure out what has happened, and then the next year she wakes up and she's 20. So she experiences this throughout her entire life, living every year completely out of order. And she finds different themes for each of these years throughout her life. So one year she decides to dedicate to travel, another year she dedicates to love. And it's really tough maintaining connections throughout this time, but she has two very important people in her life that are almost always there. And one of them, she figures out how they met them over the course of the book. Fantastic. I love this book. At the end, I saw coming just a little before it happened, but it was a wonderful surprise, and they really brought it into the plot. Like, oh my gosh, the ending, fantastic. I could not have asked for more. Amazing. All right, next up we have Julia Takes a Breath. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I already knew when I was reading this book that this was going to be one of my favorites of 2020, but I wasn't vlogging at the time. I was really stressed and anxious, and I just could not put into words how I felt about this book at the time. So now, after months, after having not done a wrap-up video at the end of the month for a long time, since February. At that point, I was so far behind. I was like, I can't do it now. Here we are. We can talk about Juliet Takes a Breath. Ah! So I did mention it in my last vlog, and I think also my Goodreads recommendations list, because a graphic novel version of it just came out. I have not been able to read it yet because, I don't know, it's just one of those things where I know that if I read it, it's over and that'll be it. It's just one of my weird quirks. Sometimes I just don't read or watch my favorite things because I don't want that last page, that last minute, that last episode, that last moment to be over. But let's actually talk about what it's about. So Juliet Takes a Breath is about Juliet. She has lived in the Bronx her whole life, and she's just been going through a lot of tough things at the moment, and she decides that she's going to reach out to one of her favorite feminist authors who lives in Portland and ask if she can intern with her. She gets the gig. She goes to Portland, and the story is basically about Juliet trying to find herself and really express who she is. Just before she left, she told really big news to her family. It did not go over how she wanted it to, and now she's in a completely different place, completely surrounded by people she doesn't know, and it's just a great time to really find the best way to express herself and really find out who she truly is. So that's what the story is about. It's full of such lovely positive messaging. It's highly feminist, very good stuff, and it's very body positive as well, which I really appreciated. It has so many great and important themes, and it really is just about a young woman trying to really figure out where she wants herself to be in society. It's wonderful. It's so good. It's lovely. The cover art is fantastic. Oh my gosh. I can't wait to read more from this author. It's just so good. It's so good. It's so good. So I'm scared to read the graphic novel because it looks beautiful, and I know I'll be reliving the story in a new way, which you don't really get to experience your favorite things in a new way or like again so often. Like a lot of people say, like, what if you could read your favorite book for the first time again and experience it all over again? And that's what I feel like reading the graphic novel version will be. So I'm like, I want to do it, but I don't want that feeling to be over. It's so good. Next up, I have Clap When You Land. This book was a really anticipated release for me this year. I've really enjoyed Elizabeth Acevedo's writing in the past, and I was really excited to read her new work this year, and it did not disappoint. This book was fantastic. I could not stop reading it. It was so enticing. It's the poetic prose that she is known for, that she does so well. Thank you, email. It's full of beautiful imagery, a lot of really close familial and friend connections. she just really paints characters so well and so intricately that you just feel like they're real people. And that's what this story was. It also was just, it made my heart throb. It was connected to true past events. It follows the events right after the real crash that happened post 9/11 with an airplane holding a lot of people going to the Dominican Republic. And just whenever you remember that it's based off a true story, and that even though the main plot of this story isn't exactly nonfiction, it's still very close to what a lot of people experienced and a lot of stories that are true that happened in that moment. So, oh my gosh, it was just an amazing story. I absolutely think you should check it out if it sounds interesting, if you enjoyed Elizabeth Acevedo's work in the past. Next up on my list is I'm Still Here, Black Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness. This one was written by Austin Channing Brown. I read this a couple months back, and this one is very good. It's nonfiction. It's Austin Channing Brown basically talking about her life and her perspective as a Black woman in America, and how actually her name has impacted her experience getting jobs, just sending emails, just anywhere her name is attached, because her name sounds like it is a white man's name. It has had a very prominent impact on how her life has progressed. And within her account of her own personal experiences, she also touches on so many larger themes. It's actually quite a short book, but the amount of information and story that she tells throughout it is very impactful. She talks about just the whole social network of the United States, for instance, which is where she lives, and how systemic racism is just ingrained in so many parts of life, and how it just makes up a system, which is why it's systemic. She talks about her experiences in day-to-day life, her experiences while she has been at work, and just all of it packs it into a narrative that just lyrically flows so well together. It's very well written, and it tells so much story, and it's hard to believe once you have finished it that it's such a short book, because it has so much information in it. So it was definitely a very impactful and important read for me this year. It also touches a lot on how businesses, schools, just institutions in general usually have some kind of diversity statement about how they prioritize diversity, and it's a big component of what they look to do, but then actually in practice you don't see diversity in their staff, and you don't see them actually reaching out and making sure they're actually doing the work to ensure that they have a diverse staff, that they have diverse ideas, that they're actually tackling racism that's happening within their structure, within their institution, that these diversity statements are kind of just, you know, words on paper and then there's no action attached to them. Just an amazing and impactful read of this year. So next up is Rage of Dragons, and this was the pick for mine and Jade's dragon-based readathon this year that happened in August. So we read a lot of dragon books, and picking which book was going to be our group book for the readathon was pretty difficult, but then we found Rage of Dragons, and Rage of Dragons just sounded so fantastic, and I'm so glad we picked it because it's, as you may have guessed, one of my favorite books of this year. Evan Winter is able to put together such fantastic characters throughout this story, and with such an intricate plot as well. I have not read that many fantasy books this year, but I'm very glad this was one of them, because oh my gosh, some of the characters are such sweet beans, but they have so much background to their character that you just know what their motivation is at every time because you've experienced it in this book. And honestly, I think that's kind of rare sometimes in fantasy books. Sure, they have their one motive, they know what they're doing, they want to catch the bad guy or whatever it is, they want revenge, but usually I don't think they have as much of a detailed background that you truly understand what that character's emotions are on the page. Evan Winter does that for all of the characters. I swear all of them have intricate backstories, all of their character descriptions have been figured out, and they all work into the plot very well. Oh my god, the plot is so good. The last 100 pages, I was listening to this on audiobook while Jade helped me move in just a very stressful time, mind you. So that was one way to finish a book. It was fantastic. Now I have 2 more books on this list and my battery is flashing. Next up, I have Blaze Wrath Games. This just came out a little bit ago. I read the arc of it, which I was very grateful to have a copy of. Since then, I was able to give it away, so hopefully that person has enjoyed it just as much as I have. But this story is basically about dragons and dragon riders, and if that were an Olympic sport kind of competition, and it's very good. I had pretty high hopes for this book. I was trying to keep it down, I'm trying to keep it subtle, but I was very excited for this book, and it lived up to my expectations. At first, it seemed kind of simple and straightforward, but the further I read along, the more the characters were interacting with each other. It was so fun to see this Olympic sport team dynamic that was happening between the different countries representing teams, which is really fun because I love soccer or football in Europe, and it's fun to see that play out in a book. And the plot just kept on, like, the plot thickened the entire time. It kept getting thick. Oh my gosh, it was very exciting. Last up, I have Giant Days. I have read 12 volumes of Giant Days in the last 7 days. You heard me right. I read 12 volumes of a graphic novel / comic series in the last 7 days. That's about 900 or so pages. I read almost 1,000 pages of comic book. I have not been able to read a physical book. I haven't been able to finish a physical book in a very long time, but I have read almost 1,000 pages of graphic novel. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. I reread the first one again last night. I don't know what's happening. It's very good. And we're back, and it's another day and we don't have to talk about it. So, where was I? Giant Days. Well, I actually just finished Giant Days, so let's talk about it some more. So, as previously may or may not have mentioned, Giant Days is about 3 friends who just have completely different personalities, totally different interests, but they meet in their first few weeks of university and they just have a really great connection and they become best friends. And these 14 volumes are literally just their adventures through university, just hanging out, having fun, living their lives, going through some emotional, life-changing moments. It's so good. I have read 14 volumes in, let me think, 10 days. Yes, I have 14 volumes in 10 days, and I'm going to reread them in the new year. I love this series so much. Oh my gosh, it is warm in my heart. I love it. So that is it for my favorite books of 2020. I do have some favorite movies and TV shows that I want to talk about, but that is for another time. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Bye! I think technically this list is actually in chronological order of when I read them, because I just looked at my Goodreads and picked the ones that I remembered. Yes, that was an email notification sound, and I'm not cutting that out.